Okay, it's absolutely great to have you all here. And well, because Woche der Kritik, of course, it's about critical discourse, but also about curating, which is something rather new in discussing cinema. I was hoping that maybe Daphné and Annalisa could share a bit with us, maybe some thoughts about seeing their film together with the other film, and just maybe what the other film did to their own film, and maybe start from that. So, who wants to start?
Um, it's hard that we just watch the films and just to say something very articulate. But I think I was thinking about obviously monuments, symbols, contemporary life put together with something else, maybe a fantasy, maybe a utopia, maybe something post-apocalyptic. I don't know. And I was thinking that what's beautiful in your film is the body and the relationship to the body, and owning, I guess, in a way, one's body as a way of liberating maybe oneself. Um, and there's something really beautiful and hectic. I don't know if hectic is the word, but something that's very intense here. Like you want to run and go forth and go forth and go forth, which is both stunning and deranging at the same time. I think, like, to start, that's what I would say.
But can I insist? Like, how do you think your film changes when seen together, Annalisia's film?
Okay.
Because both are very plural films in a way, right?
Yeah. Both change forms all the time in a way. I feel, or they borrow forms from other kind of different genres, maybe of cinema. I guess I was thinking that for my film, seeing it with Annalisa's film, it makes it more concentrate more on the heritage and the monument, and maybe also a group of people. She films herself. She films maybe her friends. I don't know. And I was thinking I do the same thing, but in a very different way. And so yeah, I thought it's the country and our personalities and all these that maybe are being more drawn here in this program. But I don't know. Maybe I'm not the best suited person to talk about it.
Are you?
Well, I really loved watching your film so much. I think the spirit and everything is it's so great, and in some to some extent I thought, in some way I thought, maybe it's kind of like an opposite side of how to relate to a sculpture. I think, like, in the sequence of the tattoos, the song, I don't think I subtitled that song, but the song says, "The Museum of Anthropology has come to life." And I was really interested in kind of approaching sculptures, and in that chapter we see a sculpture of Xochipilli, and my interest was to kind of bring them to life, and I think that was like a parallelism really strong. And well, all sculptures were destroyed already, so I think in that sense, there is an opposite feeling of trying to connect, instead of bring it down. Kind of, yeah.
For sure, right? It's two very different ways of mythology and two very different ways of reactions, right? Yours is some kind of, in a way, desperate and very punk way of recovering something, and it always gives you the feeling that not everything can be recovered, right? I mean, you can see a lot of speculation, a lot of not really fiction, but let's say spectacle, things that are not really anthropological or stuff like that. Well, of course, yours is very right. I mean, yours is very relatable and. Today I spent like 6 hours watching the first part of Shoah. So certainly there's a feeling that being overwhelmed by history is a very contemporary mood everywhere. So of course, and both are films, they have this kind of do it yourself aspect to them, right? And I was wondering just how important is haphazard in your work, because I think well for statues one can quite approximate how much haphazard there is in it. I think that for Mexico it's a bit counterintuitive. It gives you the feeling of being made by many bits and it being very fast, and sometimes overwhelming and hard to follow, but at the same time many scenes, many mise-en-scenes in it are very precise. It seems sometimes even a classical way of doing cinema, right? Just like very precise moves given to actors, very precise landscapes. So I think sharing the original idea would be surprising. So who would like to begin?
Yeah, I think I shot the film over, I don't know, I started in 2017 and I finished filming, I think, in 2020. Um, so it has many stages of different, times and I think I had different approaches to different parts. Sometimes I would just go into the city and film the city. Sometimes I would be with my friends. Sometimes I would be developing ideas with friends. So it has certainly very different approaches. But I really see the film as as the shell, as a shell of the affective relations I lived and experienced with the people I made the film with. So basically, like they are, like they're like little leaves that come in that are part of a party that we don't see, of art that they are fragments of moments that are kind of assembled together, but in truth, all those moments are kind of greater of than this film. This film kind of has like little embroidered little bits, but yes, but yeah, I don't know, I went to many places.
But what about haphazard? Like how open are you to haphazard when filming
What
something?
does that mean?
Oh, haphazard. Ooh, it's turning on the camera and not being sure what will happen. Just like planning a film that is not closed to, like, let's say a script, but just like let's see what happens.
It depends on which part. For example, the very last part that it's only 5 minutes. That's the part that I shot the most for. Like I shot so much more for that part than I did for the rest of the film, and that's because that's like almost like a feature film that I didn't make. And at some point it kind of went beyond me and I was like, no, I cannot do this. So I just had this as a small epilogue kind of trailer of a film that I didn't make. But I actually started reading a lot of Zigabertov, and I was really interested in, well, I love the man with the movie camera, and I was really interested in the movement and the life of the city. So I wanted to kind of take that into some sort of weird YouTube pixel other level. And I was shooting and living in the city a lot. So that had a lot to do with just living in the moment and being present where you are and just capturing the life around you. I don't know if that relates to what you're saying. or not?
Well,
More,
I mean,
more like on a mise en scène kind of thing.
well, in all aspects, I believe. I mean, I'm just curious, just how open to haphazard to whatever to whatever
just like
to whatever
rolling
would
and
happen.
letting something happen.
Yeah.
Very open.
Yeah.
I was super open to
Precisely.
that.
And just like, but not just filming, but also like including this material in your final cut.
Yeah, I was super open to that. Yes.
Daphné, how open are you to haphazard in your filmmaking?
I'm very open to haphazard. A new word for everyone here tonight. I think when I started filming, just like Annalisa, I filmed for a long time in parts, let's say, depending on when the funding was coming. And from a point on, the beginning of the film, I was extremely open. What I shot first was the interview I did with the guy that says that he wants to be in the statue in a cemetery, and it was the first test to see like, oh, is this idea with the statues gonna work or not? Is it, can it produce something? And I the first guy answered this, and so I'm thinking, oh, maybe there is something to find there. And then I filmed the woman who talks in the beginning about the nature of the word statue in Latin. And so she distinguishes movement and pleasure, immobility and pleasure. And so this was the beginning, kind of. And slowly, by testing out things and trying out things and meeting people and being open to a lot of things and also doing a lot of research and writing, things got more and more precise. Let's say, like when we arrived to the singing scene, well, I knew exactly what I was going to shoot.
And let's maybe open it to Robin, right? Robin, you do documentaries, but also you work collectively, so you're part of a collective. So of course, I'm going on with the haphazard and asking you. Right, because I do believe that there is a strong philosophy about chance and about reality and surrounding landscapes that is very present nowadays, especially in experimental filmmaking. And I do believe that there are at least some precious ideas to be concluded from here, from having you together, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation. I mean, it's been really a pleasure, or more than a pleasure, to engage with these two films. And I think it's also, for me, it's also like I've seen also some other films in the last days. I'm thinking also of making a new film, and for me, it's really like, all I want to think about is how do these films relate to the political present, right? And the political present can be many things, from where your struggle is. But so yeah, I mean, I was very inspired by these two films because first of all, they start with an act of refusal. I mean, to the nations, those metaphors that stand together for the nation state being the Parthenon, that of the cultural hegemony of the, Greece, Europe. And of course, with, Mexico, I mean, the state of Mexico doesn't exist. Something else exists that already existed. And I think that's the kind of acknowledgement, I think, that is here very important, this kind of recreation of the lived imaginations that are already there, like the presences that are found with your friends in the communities that you're part of, on the street, haphazardly, as you make friends.
So the word exists.
yeah, contingently, but yeah. So I do think this kind of. I was thinking also about the words of the poet Yorgos, the Parthenon bomber. I forgot now his last name. Makris. Yeah. So we just quoted in your film this thing of when will we be able to piece it together, something like that. Never will we be able to piece it together, right? So I think this kind of refusal for big symbols, I think, is very important to their film practices. And so that's where I also come. I mean, that's where I can identify with, this kind of trying to find your way with I mean, I think what is very interesting is like your your cinema languages are very different. And it's really interesting to go into that, I think, to talk about what are these tools of each of you. I mean, narrative, non-narrative to start with, and many. So I think, yeah, and I just, in my way, in my films, it's more about call and response, I would say. As I work, collectively, or try to work collectively, but most of all because when I make a film, it's trying to hold something that is already held by activists and so on, or those people that I identify with, I mean, where change has to happen. So I think it's about how cinema can rehearse, their urge for transformation, and that has to happen through like, finding it out together and call and response, people bring in stuff and we try to create it somehow haphazardly forward. So that's.
Of course, you are a producer, and of course, people wonder how well can producing go with this kind of filmmaking. Just like how open can somebody who is the money person be to this kind of rather spontaneous and at times capricious way of doing films. Well, I mean capricious because it cannot be controlled very well, of course. So it had, maybe it's not the right word.
I think by knowing the work of these two wonderful artists, you as a producer can anticipate where you're entering, right? And I think it's your responsibility to design a production that is going to serve the necessities of these two artists. And whoever enters that responsibility, it's gonna know what this person is facing, right? So you're gonna reach out to financing possibilities that are gonna help you designing the kind of production that they need. And if you don't think you're able to do that, then that's not your place. So obviously it's challenging to provide a production that needs 3 years into filming, and I don't know for how long you were, or even more, but I think that's what's fun about it. That's what's good about it. That if there are artists out there who are willing to challenge the traditional narratives, the traditional ways of creating cinema, we need also producers who are willing to challenge the traditional ways of funding and producing and making things happen. And yeah.
What are your needs from a producer, Willie? Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. But wondering from a director's perspective, for doing films as such, what are your needs from a producer, and of course your needs from a producer?
I didn't have a producer, so I wished, I dreamed that if there was someone here that could help me sort all these things out, that would be amazing. But I think that I don't know, it's challenging because sometimes I'm talking to filmmakers and they're like, yeah, we have to shoot the film in 1 month or something, and I'm like, that's insane. How could you do this in a month? It's like, what? This might take you, because some processes do require more time than just it follows this whole way of making things, which is fine. But if you have other ways of making films and sorting things out and work with other people and collaborate, then how do you make it work? I don't know. It's
because both these projects are slow projects, right? Are slow ways of filmmaking.
I just wanted to say that the co-producer of my film is here tonight, and she's amazing. She's the best, and it's I have to say it. I have to admit it, and I think, yeah, because she's very courageous, and she didn't give up. And I think trust is very important. And understanding each other maybe took us a while to, arrive to understand each other and what kind of films I want to make or we want to make together. And it was a very difficult process that started with a feature film that we're going to shoot now. And this was a way to actually stop writing and rewriting a script and trying to find, what everyone will do. When it's your first feature, you have to go to labs, you have to do this and that. And this was not working out for me. And going in the street at the beginning alone and then with other members of the crew and meeting people and having the time to share something with someone, and maybe it doesn't work on the first time. Maybe, you can't have your clock and be, now tonight there's a wrap at 7. And if we don't have it, then we won't have a film. So for me, this is super important, and maybe in documentary filmmaking, it's easier and it's a bit more normal to do that than in fiction. Experimental, I guess it's even more free. But to me, it's, as you say, it's a way of life. It's also politics. It's about how you want to share something with other people, how you want to involve them in the project. And for me, all this is important. But then how you find the money? We wrote so many dossiers and we submitted in so many. I mean, it's we used to be like, if we don't make the film in 6 months or in 1 year, we don't make it. No, it's been it's been years and we're still trying to make it. So then in the end, maybe it's not the worst.
Okay, and Robin, maybe of course, no, because you're kind of in the collective work you do. Of course, you're kind of integrating all roles into a team. So maybe talk a bit about collective film practice, like decision making. Of course, you don't seem to be working on a budget, but other kind of decisions, right? Like subject. How do you do it? What do you shot? Final form, editing, maybe some self-funding decisions. Maybe we'll delve into this a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, the last film, which was a feature film, that wasn't, I mean, let's say I made that on my own. I altered it myself, but it was with all the lessons from, let's say, working in the Post Film Collective, which I imagine you referred to, and the Post Film Collective was more, let's say, it was a radical, like, let's say, it was like absolutely horizontal film collective of 7 filmmakers, of which some already had made a film, some absolutely not, and it was about just sort of figuring out for ourselves what it means to claim the right to make a film. I was mainly producing it. And before I was also always self-producing. And there I consider I think the first thing I did was to write like an application for a film that we never made. I just see it really like you write a whole script and so on. And then when you have it, you don't do it. You just start over again. And this is basically the main method of working with them. In the end, we also never made a film, but we realized that as we sort of, what we did, we would just do this kind of very like super improvised ways of approaching film, like someone is reading a poem and then instantly each of us is making a film with their phone, and that's, but then we would rewatch everything, and it was this kind of collective watching that really gave meaning to the thing. And then we realized, like, let's work in, we developed something called Cine Assembly, where we would just all the time show our bits and pieces and kind of share that with the audience and kind of like just start doing storytelling around it, sort of from the acknowledge that cinema, maybe in the first place, is just a bunch of people in the same room, imagining together. And some of it can be on the screen and a lens and so on, but not everything has to be. And let's give that some space. So that's a very non-industry kind of way of approaching things. But I think it was very important for the kind of like soul and understanding of like what filmmaking could mean for us. So voila, that's what I can say. And then like taking it into my like feature film, which I then like said, okay, I don't want to self-produce anymore. I work with a producer. We kind of like, we work within that shell of, yes, there is a development. Yes, there is then a sort of period of real shooting, but in that we still try to stick to this kind of very like, proposals that come from the people you collaborate with. It's a kind of it's an in-between way of working, because I do feel like it's important. I mean, when I alter it, I do feel there's a sort of necessity to translate things to a certain, like, I don't know, staging or fictionalization that would
Which sounds a bit similar, or at least it's touching what seems to be part of your practice in what we ask from a statue, right? And maybe we can go a bit deeper into that. Like, it's, of course, it has its non-fictional parts, of course it has its rather conceptual parts, so maybe not really scripted, but things that you knew very well what you want to look like from the beginning, and all this coming together. How was that?
I knew I had too many ideas for this film, because with the more time passed, the more ideas I had and the more things I wanted to integrate. And I was trying to find a way that would be simpler and clearer, but my desire was not there. So I kept shooting these bits and pieces, let's say. But maybe where I connect with what you said is that I have a few collaborators, let's say Costas, who is here, and we do a lot of things together, and a lot of friends participated in the film. Let's say they became the groupuscule, and to me that's when I understood that this is a gift that I'm being given by these people who are gathering. They are, most of them, my friends. Some people I don't know them. Other people suggested, oh, he would be good for this groupuscule and all this, and that so it's documentary, but I give them a supposition that is fake. Okay, that you want to destroy the Parthenon. Would you destroy it now? So it's in between. I don't even know what's real and what's not, in a way, sometimes. And what was interesting for me was, in order to even believe even more in the power of cinema, is that in some festivals people think that the interviews in the streets are fake, and that the groupuscule exists, which is to me very strange, And when I realized it's possible, apparently, I thought, oh wow, I could go so much further, with all of this. I shouldn't have been so scared, let's say, to is it gonna work or not? It's a bit confused answer, but
and maybe let us know a bit more about Yorgos Makris. So I kind of tried to research a bit, but there's very little information in English. So be our messenger.
He's not very well known, not even in Greece. He was a poet that lived during Second World War, especially, let's say. And who wrote some poems, as you see in the films, and he was kind of a situationist before situationism. I don't know if it makes sense. He was a provocateur, and he didn't want his poems to survive him. So they were published much later, like a few years ago. And I had made a film with the Parthenon again that was destroying itself. And one day someone told me, you've read Makris. And I said, no, who is this guy? And they said, we thought your idea was from there. So I searched into Makris, and I was blown away by his poems. And that's why I wanted to make another film about it again. But not a lot of people know him, actually. So he wrote the manifest after the second, when the war finished in Greece, the Germans left, and it's an interesting moment to write such a provocative poem. Instead of being like nationalist, he does exactly the exact opposite. And what was interesting for me was like, so many echoes. I can make so many echoes. This poem has so many echoes to now, and like, what would Makris say, or what does this text tell us today? Like, is it still relevant or not?
And it's actually, I mean, Right. I mean, I do kind of know the Greek society a bit, and it's certainly quite. I mean, this has been so present, right, in the last decades. This kind of anxiety of Greece, also in Italy, being this kind of former, very right, lagon civilizatie, the beginning of Western civilization, and kind of like people being very not disappointed in a way that it's not possible anymore for them.
Yeah, we are the bad, how do you say, not the bad citizens, but we're like, people can come to Greece and say, oh, these people are not like ancient Greeks, you know. They're ugly, they're poor, they're irresponsible. And in that sense, it's true, you know. But in another sense, it's been like, I don't know, Greece has been punished, let's say, in many ways the last decades because of the crisis, because of a lot of things. And of course there is the extreme right that is going up. Sorry, my English is a bit approximative. And so there is all this narrative about, oh, but we come from there, you know, we come from this glorious past. And the more we lose ourselves, the more we want to hold on to this past. And I don't think the past is a problem. The problem is what we make of it, you know, how we understand it and how we defend it. Like right now in Greece, but like everywhere, we were talking about it before, there's a crazy gentrification. People cannot even live in the city center, but at the same time, we have to be there for tourists. We have to be, you know, now in Santorini, people are saying, oh, don't go out from your houses because there's not enough space for tourists to pass. So it's a question of what we do with ourselves and how we have found ourselves there, you know. But it can be Greece or it can be anywhere else, I guess.
Well, I mean, not everywhere else you can find this kind of very beautiful monuments, but what I wanted to say is it's somehow also very interesting that you make this film about ephemerity and this kind of call to arms for ephemerity, but you also shoot it on celluloid. Of course, we've been discussing this before. We had the dinner before. And it became a very geeky discussion about celluloid and 16 millimeters and 35. But of course, your film is specifically interesting because of this kind of contradiction, right? Because we do associate this kind of digital interface with something that is going through our fingers, running through our fingers. We won't have it forever. Why celluloid? We always associate with film archives, with preservation, with something that is monumental in itself, even if it's a small film, right?
Yeah, I like working with film because it's very expensive. Because it's expensive and it means you can't shoot so much and it's precious. And also I understand it. I understand the light comes in and it hits the negative and you have an image and that you cannot erase. So this is something that maybe can talk with the monument and with ephemerity and all this. And also it's a way of working. You know, you have some film, either you just go for it, which I do it sometimes, either you have very few takes, and it's a limit. And also I like not seeing something immediately. You never know what's going to happen. And anyone who has worked with film knows that there can be catastrophes or there can be nice surprises. Haphazard, exactly. Especially if you're not in a big production that's where everything is controlled, you know. Capricious. Poor. No. Yeah, I think so. And I think for me, I was looking for, like in Greece, we were going to protest. A lot of things were happening in the last years, but suddenly not much is happening now. So for me, it was a way to go to some absurd things, let's say, that I try to have in the film, and humor was a way to try to deal with okay, let's say like, we cannot do this politically, we cannot manage that, everything is crazy. So how can we arrive at another stage, or how can we talk about something? Maybe through something absurd or Dadaist, or I don't know. And it was a way to free myself, let's say, from the load of not knowing what to do, of history and the situation, big narratives.
And your journalist, of course, it's a very what my first access to your film was some sort of very childish gaze. I was looking at it and wondering all the time, how did she do it? How was this made? You never I mean, I never kind of distinguish what's staged, what's filmed from afar, what's shoot on celluloid, what's shoot rather fastly on digital. It's a very complex texture, let's say. And maybe giving us some behind the scenes in the making of it. You said it took quite a while and you shoot it in phases. And I think that's very interesting for both of your projects, that they kind of have this kind of sincerity of saying, I don't have one final idea about it, but rather I have a collection of ideas that maybe put together can result in something. It's an exercise of montage in a way. And of course myself, but maybe people from the audience as well, wonder how many of these things were made technically, let's say.
Well, I love film as well. And it's like
Is it all shot on film?
almost all of it. I have some hacks of filming on mini DV and reshooting it on 16. The parts that I select, because sometimes it's really expensive to shoot in film. So if you want to shoot a lot, like for example with Marcela, who I did all this like dance movement exploration, I couldn't shoot everything we were doing. So I would shoot mini DV, and if I found something that I really liked, I would reshoot it in 16 millimeters to have it in that sort of format and texture. And I did some hand processing, some handmade film techniques in this film. But of course, like there's a lot of film that I just went to a lab and I had it processed. But yeah, I think that I love like the fleshiness of film. It's just a very, very peculiar thing that if you vibrate with it, then you kind of just, it's like, I remember I wasn't shooting that much when I really fell in love with film after taking Luther Price class when I was in Boston, and he taught handmade film, which is all the techniques to alter film, hand processing, is the painting film, cutting film, blah blah blah. And then I totally fell in love with it. And then it's like, it's so expensive, but I'm gonna find the way to pay for it because I really connect with this. In terms of like the hand processing, the first part where we see the Tenochtitlan and kind of like being torn apart, that's distressing the film. So you put it in hot water with.
Did you film that,
I did.
or is it the found footage?
It's found footage. Yeah. Reshot, found footage, and then altered with this technique to kind of make the emulsion separate and then move. There's some other parts that are just painted, scratched. The only part that we see that it's video is the part of the quinceañera. The girl in the red dress. That was shot in mini DV, and I was gonna reshoot it in 16, but at the end I liked it in mini DV, so I just kept it. And I think the visual universe kind of gets along, so that's fine. And as my approach of filming, it would be basically having the camera around, but for the part that I kind of did some sort of mise en scène was with the third part, the part that is devoted to Tlazolteo.
The woman.
Yes. That with my friend Marcela, who is the one who's eating a lot of mole, with her I was kind of developing that all that let's say movement part. And Lisette She was my roommate, a really, really close friend. And I went to her house and I was just there with her family, her mom, her grandma, just shooting everyday kind of life. And then the part where they're together, that was kind of like an exercise of us getting together and getting to know each other and being really close, and then do this sort of parts where they would be sharing intimate spaces and filming that, even though they didn't live together.
But what about the, let's say, the starting point, that meat that opens the film, right? I mean, of course, for the statues, maybe the mythology invoked is much more accessible to Western audiences.
Right.
But certainly, there's many aspects of your films that escape a foreign gaze, let's say, like mine. So maybe what was the initial aspect of mythology that inspired you to begin this film, maybe?
Yeah, well, I left Mexico City. Mexico City is the city I was raised. I grew up in Mexico City. I was born in Veracruz, but I moved there when I was 8 years old. And when I was 18, I left Mexico for like 6 years. And when I came back, I saw the city like and felt the city in such an intense way, and I started thinking a lot about political issues that I wasn't thinking when I was growing up there as a teenager. Um, Especially like all the colonial violence, not only from like 500 years ago, but the colonial violence today, and all the mechanisms of and the different changes that violence has kind of been readjusted. The national state of Mexico is the great inheritor of the colonial violence. So the to me, the relationship with the landscape and the city, as a place that has been, by so much violence, been disconnected and erased its own history and cultural, links. That kind of, well, it. I wanted to somehow learn about all the culture that we don't have, and kind of connect to some extent, to try to open up images of, I don't know, to explore images of deities in a contemporary, either intimate or external, like in the streets. So, in the first chapter, we have this passage of Tezcatlipoca. In the second one, with Xochipilli, the Lord of Flowers and of Party. Then I wanted to kind of approach images of deities that are related to sexuality, which Tlazolteotl and Xochiquetzal are both linked to that. Xochiquetzal is also really related to partying, and partying led me to all this like insane universe of folklore, which I think over there in that chapter, which is the longest, the color one, I get into a lot of the issues that were kind of really disturbing me. And the last one, I approached the myth of the creation of man by Quetzalcoatl, who goes to the underworld to get the bones of the ancestors, and he takes it to another goddess, Cihuacoatl, to grind them and pierce his penis, and with his blood and the bones he creates humanity. There's also another myth of Quetzalcoatl following an ant to a sacred mountain, and he takes the grains and brings them to humanity. He's like the one who shares corn, which is the basic like grain, to with humanity. So I was interested in exploring myths in an experimental, oniric way, in some sort of way to having a dialogue with them.
The obvious question. How I mean, of course, I wonder how does it feel to watch Annalisa's film from a Spaniard's perspective. Of course, right? We've been talking about growing up in national cultures and inheriting gazes and certain ways of understanding. So of course, the obvious question is how does it feel to watch a film about indigenous culture, Mexican, as somebody who comes from Spain?
It feels extremely necessary. Extremely necessary. That's how it feels. Yeah. Thank you. I think I extremely value the work that artists like you are putting into this, but I really would like for Spaniards to do the job as well. Yeah.
What do you think about this nonchalant, unapologetic way of approaching cinema and mythology and Mexican culture? Like, would you? I mean, of course, you endorse it. You seem excited about it, but on a pragmatic way of understanding it, do you think a middle way, a more didactic way, as you said, an academic way, would do better for worldwide ignorance, or you think the kind of punch
I think
is more effective?
Think the academics have been done. The academics have been done many times, and people are not listening. So we need the punk. We need the punk. We need the action. We need that, and we need the feelings, because sometimes explanations seem to not be enough, and to feel it in a way in which, like you were saying, the body is there. They're putting the body. They're putting so much that it's almost like it's almost impossible to not take it that way. I think you might read it and you might choose to not take it, but after being in front of this work, it's inside you already. So I think it's needed to do it this way.
And of course, statues come from another place, right? It's a bit about some sort of disillusion with political action and all sorts of this kind of sour dreams that haven't become true. And of course, even if it doesn't seem to have your film doesn't seem to have a strategy of communicating political action either. So I was wondering about you, like what do you feel your film says to an audience that is rather interested in action?
Well, the groupuscule falls asleep in the end, so I don't know if it's a very hopeful film about action, but it made me kind of hopeful, because when I took my camera and went out in the streets, the people I met, the way they talked, and also all the protagonists of the film, the way they engaged with the scenes and the subject and what we were talking about, did surprise me. And even at the beginning of the film, I'm really depressed, and at the end of the film, I'm actually pretty, like, I'm there, and if you, I know myself, so it's easy for me to understand, but my voice in the when I make the interviews in the market, it's not the same voice that I have at the beginning, because I have more energy, and I've been energized by the film itself and by the people who have participated in it. So I don't know, obviously it's my experience and it's a film, but it did make me think that all these people needed something and wanted to talk about some things and wanted to get together and do something. It's just that we don't know what to do exactly, you know, except for going, of course, in protests and talking about things and posting stuff on Facebook or Instagram, you know. But I don't know. For me, also, humor was a way to take action against depression and immobility.
Very volcanic. I think it's the right time for interventions from the audience, questions, comments, insults.
Hello, and thank you for both of the films. I found the second one very visually very appealing, and I am very interested to know more about the editing process and the structure. I understand from the discussion that you were very open for, during the filming process, very open for improvisation. And was it the same with editing? For example, I saw that the film was divided in a couple of chapters, which were visualized with these dots. And I wanted to know if this was planned after you already saw all the material that you collected. And beside of that, I would like to know also about the technical part, because most of the material was like film material. And was it also edited in an analog technical way or digitally? And how much of it was it planned, and how much of it was, let's say, freestyled?
Thank you for your question. The film, I wanted to edit the analog. And then I started seeing that my editing was insane. And I was like, there's no way I can edit this analog. I mean, there is actually a way, but I will probably still be working on that film for many other years. So I was like, no, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this analog. So I edited the film digitally. I wrote an idea for a grant, and I was like, I want to make 5 short films, and they gave me the grant. So from the beginning, there was an idea of approaching myth from a contemporary landscape in various different ways, but then I started really developing the ideas, and different chapters started to grow in different ways. There were some ideas that were kind of really, I don't know how to say that. They were kind of already very clear on what I had to do in terms of the editing. Like, for example, the first chapter, I had really clear idea that I wanted to begin with all the maps, then get to the subway and have all that montage of like intercuts, and then have a Tenochtitlan part that I would hand processed and do this technique. But there were some other parts that I had no idea as how they would come together. And then that was insane. I don't know. It's like I had to do a lot of kind of playing around with the material to find what kind of resonated with what part, and it's kind of weird because it is a really interesting part of filmmaking. The film is made in the editing part. It's, I don't know, it's like you can have amazing material and you can really spoil it if you don't do a well job as an editor. Or the other way around, you can have something that is not so good and then be an amazing editor and something great comes out. I don't know. It's really difficult. And the part of the third part of Tlazolteotl, I was interested in the flashing kind of intercuts as a way to draw kind of two times together. But all those sequences were, all those images, when I was shooting them, I was like really disturbed because I was like, I don't know, like if you don't have some sort of script, you have endless possibilities of shooting whatever. And I had to make some decisions of where to put the camera and shoot what. So I was just all the time kind of following my intuition. And that followed when I was editing, because I had all these like different images that you could put together in so many different ways. But I think intuition, it's a beautiful knowledge. It is knowledge, and it's a kind of knowledge we have that goes into a very profound part of ourselves. So I think working from intuition leads to interesting places.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add to that. So thank you for that, because yeah, I was gonna actually say, I mean, earlier you said something about political, and I was like, for me, like this kind of, you know, making a body of work like this and reorienting to what is valuable, what is precious, you know, following that embodied intuition is like something super like you know, precious to reclaim, to hold on to. So this kind of act of reclamation also as a way to find like how can we make films. I mean, you know, like against this context of erasure where, you know, predominantly where you look around there's this other, you know, presence, and you have to find a kind of forge your way, you know, against that. And so I mean that's, and I mean, you know, and when I talk with friends also coming from, you know, very colonized contexts and so on, so, you know, I just believe also, and to work with this kind of very material film, this kind of, I think that like it makes so much sense, right? So I think it's about also finding a way of presence and belief in that film itself. I mean, that's
Okay, so I had a question for Daphne. I think you've already talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to ask, because it's really rare, I think, to see films which are so political and at the same time they manage to be funny, because people were laughing quite a lot. And I was wondering, because it's really easy for that to come off as if you were ridiculing collective action, but you managed to not do that at all. At the contrary, I think. And so I was wondering how you approached that, if it was something you found with the people that you found on the street, or how that happened.
Thank you for your question. Yes, some people sometimes say that this film is very ironic, and I don't feel like it's ironic. I mean, at least I really didn't want to be ironic. I think humor comes from, with Costas, when I was making the film, we showed at some point in a festival like a work in progress. It was mainly rushes, and of course in Greece you show this with all this Parthenon thing, and people were like only talking about the subject and the statues and the Parthenon, and we were like, oh, like shit, you know, how can we go away from this and like try to find a way to talk about ourselves today, and in a way that isn't just depressing and pedantic and very theoretical. And Costas was like, no, you have to be like, you have to go and be light and try to find something that's humorous, just like we are in life, actually, because in life we are a lot of things. We can be worried, and we can be serious, and we can be ridiculous. And so I think we tried, and also by not being afraid of being a bit ridiculous and making fun of oneself is fine. I think it was important. And I think maybe just people after that, they bring something. Each person brought their own sense of humor, and maybe it's not super funny, but I think it does give the film something that doesn't take itself so seriously, let's say. Yeah, because like for when I go to Makronissos, which is this island that we see just for a bit, in Greece it's a very heavy thing. A lot of people were saying, oh, don't go there, you know, if you don't make a film about this, don't even touch it. And we were with Costas, we were saying, well, not touching it is once again something like, oh, this is another monument and we cannot touch it, so we won't relate to it, because if you don't feel it belongs to you too, then it's there. It's like a picture, you know. So I think trying to mingle all these things together helps.
This is interesting, right? This kind of topic of responsibility towards representing one's culture. And I was wondering, did you feel this when making your film? Just like some sort of heavy burden of making things right and find the accurate representation that would make people happy?
No, I don't think I felt I don't think I felt that. I think you know, I was more interested in exploring the concerns and things that were troubling me, and tried to understand what I was seeing, and trying to you know, the representation of native cultures. It comes to us in the cities as something that has been how do you say that, overly kind of represented by the state as something to through folklore, through this is our great past, la 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 la. So, but there's a weird mechanism in folklore where it's only used as something that you subtract and you use to basically promote pride or something, or to entertain, to have foreigners come and be like, oh, don't you love this like cultural thing, or la la la. It's like for entertainment or something. It's a show. But it has nothing to do with really knowing a culture, and it actually it kind of creates a huge gap of like disconnecting the cultural elements from their cultures that are being erased and that are being massacred, or that are being stolen their land till this day. I mean, so all these representations that are exalted through folklore come to us in some sort of disconnected way, you know, like for example, the symbol of it's called La Piedra del Sol, which is in our 10 peso coin. And that image has a lot of information. Like it has the 20 days, the 20 symbols of the calendar, of the Mexica calendar. It has the 5 sons of the legend of the sons. And many Mexicans don't know the symbols. Yeah. Don't actually know what all those things are or come from, or, you know, there's a really huge disconnect. And I grew up in that disconnected place. And, you know, I was saying like how really fucked up is that my now a friend is going to a university to learn about their ancestors and their religious feelings and cosmovision. I don't know. It's like, and I was there also thinking, this is so weird. Why am I here? Like this should be something that is part of, I don't know, of our life, and yet it's not. The you know, the life in Mexico City and what is called the mestizos is very Western. So I don't know if I have the I certainly don't have the, how do you say that? Yes, to say, oh yeah, I'm representing this as it should. No, I'm certainly not doing that. I am approaching all these images and kind of daring to dance with them in a weird way. But I don't know, some people might say, no, that's like, but I don't know. I think it's a way to have a dialogue. Like, for example, the people that have the tattoos, I think it's a way to approach an image and to have a dialogue with it, because it speaks to you. And like, I had a lot of interviews with all these people that have a tattoo, and they didn't make it to the cut. The audios of them explaining why that image and what that image is and la la la. But I think in the urban areas, I found that as a beautiful way of like approaching an image and kind of making it yours and trying to connect with, I don't know.
Any rather last interventions?
Annalisa, you said like a couple questions ago something was upsetting you when you were working on the color part of the movie. Like, can you maybe tell us what was upsetting for you?
Mexican folklore. That is horrifying to me. I mean, like I just said, I think it's a really insane tool of cultural appropriation that is not ethical, that is really fucked up from the nation state of Mexico. And I was approaching when I was in color and I wanted to explore the image of Tlazolteotl, I had to approach Mexican fiesta. And that's what led me to folklore, which to me was like getting my hands in like the I felt really comfortable in the other universe of darkness, and then the party and all of that, because I didn't want it to come across as me celebrating Mexican folklore. I wanted to kind of put it into sort of cámara de presión, like some sort of pressure machine that would to some extent bring it to expose itself and decompose or something like that. That was my intent. and putting a lot of other audios that will make the image render differently. But yeah, I mean, the folklore is like the way the Mexican state appropriates different cultural elements from native nations and brings them into this level of, to this brand of Mexicanness, and by doing so deleting kind of the connection it has with its culture.
Like, I feel like in that way, when you're talking about turning that into a brand, I feel like that's exactly what happened in Daphne's movie, where the Parthenon is a brand, and it's exactly that element reclaiming tourism, and in that way the two films feel very connected.
The Parthenon, there's a book that I opened in the film where you see the Parthenon that the political prisoners had to build in order to become pure again and believe in nationalist ideas. And right now the Parthenon that we see is a Parthenon that the archaeologists have been rebuilding to look as in the 5th century before Christ. So they are erasing all the history that happened in between in order to put it back to its initial idea, let's say, but with their own style. So they will put, how do you say, béton, concrete. They put concrete everywhere. It's white when it was colored. You know, they choose what kind of purification they want to do. So
Park.
Exactly.
Park, yeah.
But people don't necessarily know it. That's the thing, because we think, oh yeah, it's normal, but everything else has been erased.
Okay. Oh, there's one more. Yeah.
Hi there. Just one last very super short question, not really inspired because there's a lot to think about with both films. I would love to know what are the opportunities to see your films again, whether there are plans to distribute them in certain platforms. How would one be able to watch both of your films again and again?
I can send you the link.
Garga.
Yeah, I mean, except for festivals, especially for a short film, I don't know if it's going to be on a platform then. But a link, and maybe there are some platforms that could maybe eventually have our films, I think. But yeah.
Isn't a movie collaborating with this event?
Yeah, exactly.
Is Did movie collaborating with this event? Yes, that's a great question. Okay, so this has been very intense, very rich. Thank you so much. Not just for these two films, but for what you do in your professional, life every day, because this is what makes this kind of films possible. So thank you very much for your interventions, for your participation. Yes.